Hey guys, welcome back. This week I wanted to get a little bit more organized in my shop, so I went ahead and purchased 16 of these little plastic storage containers. They were about $1 a piece, and I figured I would make a little plywood cubby to mount above this storage cabinet where I'm not necessarily utilizing the space. If you want to see how I did it, stay tuned. I wasn't quite sure what plywood I wanted to make it out of. I ended up settling on the more expensive one just because I'm a little bit particular when it comes to plywood. But I'm sure the less expensive stuff would have worked just fine. When I went to the home store, I brought along a dimensions list. Most home stores will actually cut the plywood down to size for you. When having the home stores cut it, you always want to check and make sure that the pieces are square. I then took the plywood over to my miter saw and started cutting the vertical supports. The only reason I'm doing this on a miter saw is because I currently don't own a table saw. The cuts were a little bit wider than the capacity of my miter saw, so I had to flip the board and repeat the cut. I then took my circular saw straight edge and ripped down some of the pieces. Doing this at a table saw would definitely be quicker and more accurate. Here you can see the vertical pieces, along with the horizontal ones. I then notched out one of the vertical pieces and made sure that it would fit, and then used it as a template to cut the other pieces over at the bandsaw. A little bit of finish sanding on all the pieces. My plan was to paint as many of the pieces ahead of time as possible. I could then mark the horizontal pieces to where they meet up with the vertical supports. You can then use a little bit of glue and some brad nails to attach the pieces together. Checking my progress with a square to make sure that everything lines up. Then you repeat the process until you have 4 levels high. Once the intersection was complete and painted, I then fitted up for the bottom, top, and then both of the sides. Then I transferred some lines to where the screws would be located. I basically assembled the carcass of a cabinet around the divider assembly. You can follow me over at Instagram to catch preview pictures of some of the projects I'm working on, along with other shenanigans. I just happened to be watching the Summers Woodworking show that day in the shop. I then cut down some hardboard over at the miter saw for the label holders. Nice little tip, if you're cutting something too small over at the miter saw, use a push stick or a piece of scrap wood to hold it down so that your fingers aren't too close to the blade. Once I had all the hardboard pieces cut to size, I took them over to the drill press and drilled 2 holes on either end. I then created a small jig to hold the pieces tight while I routed out the recess. The idea was to be able to have the pieces slide in, and then I could route out the recess and then just unscrew one piece and then slide them out. It actually went pretty quick even though I had 16 pieces to make. I used a custom router base plate and then screwed in a brass collar to ride along the jig. Here you can see the pieces with the holes in the completed recess. I then switched out the collar to a larger one, and then added an auxiliary fence to the jig, increased the depth of the router bit, and then finished the cut to go all the way through the piece. The label holders were nearly complete. I just figured that they needed a little bit of rounding on the corners. A little bit of gray primer was the color of choice. Flip and repeat. I could then hold it up to the containers and drill pilot holes for the rivets. Being I was dealing with plastic, it was wise to use a backing washer on the rivets. The labels slide in nice and easy. I could then worry about attaching the back piece, which is also out of 1/2-inch plywood. When designing the cabinet, I allowed for the sides, top, and bottom to protrude about 3/4 of an inch from the back. This allowed me to put a 3/4 inch piece of plywood for a French cleat on the back. Once the French cleat was glued and screwed to the back of the cabinet, I had to clear away some items to make room for my new organizer. Once I located the studs, I used 3-inch screws to attach the French cleat to the wall. And as earlier, I'm actually using a level app on my phone. It's surprisingly accurate. I could then hoist the cubby in place and hang it on the French cleats. There you go, all said and done. 16 cubbies just waiting to get labeled and filled with, well, whatever junk I got lying around the shop. I left some room to the left of this one that I'm going to make another one down the road. I think I'm going to change it up a little bit and design it a little bit different. I wasn't too happy how I executed this one, but hey, it's going to serve its purpose regardless. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next week.